And as always, we're going to be looking for accurate context, risk management, and always exercising good patience.
Everybody who's traded has gone through periods of time where their strategy hasn't worked.
If not a hard stop, you should reevaluate the trades you're in based on time.
That's what we're here for, is to put ourselves in the best success. A trading routine does that, builds that habit, lets you know what to work on, what to reflect on, and what to improve on the next day.
Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to the Coach's Playbook. I'm joined by Mick, Dan, and Hogue, the usual trio in there from the remote world. Today, we're talking about how wins and losses hit different. And as Hogue so eloquently put it, if we celebrate our wins, is it okay to lament losses? We'll dive into that. But first, Mick, you said we had a great shout out today. So
yeah, great shout out. Really happy for Brian Rueda. He's up about 8,000 on the day today. Tread water a little bit, some bigger swings here and there, but right back to new account highs. I shouldn't say right back to them. New account highs today, up 8,000.
Well, keep strong there, Brian. We're hoping to hear from him at some point because he's done some great things in the funded level. So today, I'm going to let Hogue start because he came up with this topic and he is not here anymore. Did he?
Same old story.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I hit something on my keyboard and I went away.
You got to turn off those hotkeys for you. We got to get you like the jitterbug version of a laptop, which is like a button that says charts.
We need, just put some mittens on before we start going live.
Hands off.
So what I was saying, Hogue, since you came with this topic, maybe you could flesh it out a little bit about what kind of drew you to this, because I think we all have some ideas here.
Sure. So everybody loves wins. Nobody likes losses. And psychologically, they say that a winning trade gives you half as much pleasure as a losing trade gives you pain. There are ways that people have shown that, that tends to be true. We really kind of beat ourselves up over any losses we take, any mistakes we made. And I think, we really should celebrate the good things, the winning days, the winning trades. It's just, you just got to keep as even keeled as you can. You can't get a huge ego because you had one winning trade or one winning day. You also can't be so hard on yourself after a losing trade or a losing day that you can't continue to operate as you normally would, as though there was no change in your mood or anything. And we know that that's difficult. So, and Mick, I'm sure will agree with this. With our funded traders, quite often we'll see a funded trader have a really good day. He'll knock it out of the park one day. And we got to keep an eye on them for the next trading day, because some of the worst trading days the traders have are right after a big winning day, right? You get a big winning day, the next day you're at risk of a big losing day. Yeah. Why is that? Well, you have a big winning day. We have this, I think, ability, or maybe it's more of a fault, to say, I am the king of the markets now. The markets are going to do what I tell it to because I had a good day today, and tomorrow could be a whole different story. I was saying that on the prep this morning, I was listening to some jazz, and it occurred to me how much like jazz the markets are, because they have a different time signature all the time, and it can change in a heartbeat. So know going into your trading day that losses are going to hurt twice what winners do. Celebrate your winners. Don't get a big head. Get your feet back on the ground, and then get back into looking for good opportunities. Losing trades are going to happen. If you have a loss, that's part of your process. That's nothing to beat yourself up over. If you have a loser that is out of process, those are going to be some of the more damaging trades. But the worst trade is the trade that you take out of process, out of anger or emotion, that ends up being a big winner. Those are the ones that reinstill or instill bad behavior moving forward. So, in my opinion, celebrate winning trades. Yay me, good trade. What's next? Losing trades. This was a calculated risk. It didn't work. It wasn't a winner. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be a loser for the rest of my life. It's just one trade.
Yeah, they're all just one trade. Just a side note before we go. Mick, we had a question about what's Brian trading?
NASDAQ.
NASDAQ. When in doubt, our traders are trading NASDAQ.
Yeah, right.
So fear is such a more potent motivator. And this might sound a little bit depressing, but I'm just speaking from my own experience. I think a lot of people feel this way, is that the lows can be so much lower than the highs. As far as if I think about what's the best that I can feel in anything, I don't think that that's as good as how bad. Think about the worst that you felt, the most fearful. That's always going to be worse. And that just goes back to, we talk about it all the time with Tendler. That's just evolution. We're hardwired to survive. So we have very powerful biological and psychological things that push us to avoid things that are danger. And back in the day, that danger was, a lion or a marauder or something like that. But our brains haven't changed that much. So we feel that same thing when it comes to things that aren't necessarily threatening our life, but are negative outcomes, bad trades, things going against it. And then you couple that with, I think, especially in trading, the reason sometimes the good doesn't feel as good is because we kind of live this fallacy that winning trades are the only thing that we should be doing. And so if I book a winning trade, it's great. I've accomplished that job. That's what I should be doing every time. And if it's a losing trade, it's I am an effing idiot. I am the worst at this. Why am I doing this? And then you think about things you did 10 years ago. It's a bad mind space. And I think that while you cannot control your emotions, I think it is important to, as Hogue mentioned, to take a moment to feel good about the good trades, but realize that every trade is just one trade and that you're only going to have, probably with most of your strategies, between 40 and 60% winners. So just take it. It's part of the process. So that's the way I try and digest it. Mick, you look like you have something to say there.
I do. I have to say, not a single person out there trading should say they're an effing idiot. If you're framing out your trades ahead of time, you're never going to find yourself in a scenario where you're saying that. If you flail and deviate from your plan, there's a good chance you can justify saying that, but we shouldn't be doing that. We should really be, measuring what our risk is, before these trades. And if you're doing so, it makes it that much easier to take a loss and say, hey, I tried, this was my setup, and it just didn't work out. To
Right.
say that, to put yourself in a position where you're actually saying that, and you could, but you got to be doing something very wrong with your trading in order to get there.
Yeah, you should be going into it knowing that there are two outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And unless something could change in the middle, but basically any trade you go into, there should be two outcomes. And when you put it on, it's essentially out of your control. You have to manage the trade, but you should already be accepting that it's a coin flip, maybe a little better. You know what the two outcomes are. It's like putting in I don't want to use a betting analogy, but if you just put a bet and watch a game, once you put the bet, it's out of control. You're hopefully not running to double down on said bet several times after the first quarter, second quarter, final drive. That would be insane. Though we see that happen quite a bit in trading, where you start out with these are the two outcomes. But then it's like, well, I don't like the outcome that seems to be happening right now, so I'm going to pull it back a little more, or I'm going to add. And that's what I think leads to the really bad psychological outcomes. Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I mean, it goes back to one of the, the best lessons I ever was taught. My old man has always told me, because my big thing when I first started in trading was I wanted to hit the home runs. I wanted the big wins. And, they come in time, but, everything in trading, we talk about, the sports analogies, baseball, right? The only way to hit a grand slam is to load the bases. You got to hit singles. You got to fill the bases before you have that chance to hit a grand slam. So my dad always told me, never let one trade make or break you as a trader. It will never be the case. No one good trade is going to be the one that defines you, and no losing trade is going to be the one that defines you. It's building over time. And in trading, when it comes to winning and losing, you see it a lot in the newer traders. Emotions get involved. Hogue, you talked about, a trader having a big day follows up the next day with a rough day, because they get this emotion of, I figured it out. They think like, a lot of times you think, okay, there's my chance. I figured out how to do this thing, as opposed to just doing what you did the day before. I executed my plan. I focused on what I was supposed to do, and it worked in my favor. But instead, we get this idea of like, I know what I'm doing. Now I can start taking some shots. I can take a little bit of risk. And when we start to do that, we're focused, where you're taking your loss, if it's a loss. And if it is a loss, you just move on. It's inevitable in trading. This is not a standard job where, you make a call, you sell a product. Okay, you got your commission. If you make the sale, you're not losing. Where in trading, you can lose. You can have losses. So it's not this, I sit down for 4 hours a day or 8 hours a day. I'm getting paid this much per hour. I know at the end of the week, I'm going to get a paycheck. That's not this industry. And if that's really, really what you want, maybe this is not the right industry to be in. But I think the upside potential is much greater if we can manage that expectation going into it and saying, okay, my job here is to execute on this plan that likely you've worked really, really hard on, and you've spent hours upon hours staring at the screens, watching the market move, creating this strategy and this plan in an unbiased state. Because remember, when we get into those trades and we start trading, we become biased and we have, hopes. And everyone, that doesn't go away. When you're in a trade, you're absolutely hoping it goes in your favor and you hit your profit target and you make money in every trade. No doubt about it. But when you can set that bias aside, when you get in these trades and you can accept that loss and you can accept those wins and you go from one trade to the next and you forget about the past. You always have to forget about that past. Otherwise, you're going to let the past dictate your future. And as they say in life, don't let your past dictate your future.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think about what some like healthy ways would be to celebrate a trade, because there is another, I don't think we've talked about this pitfall before, but I certainly saw it a lot along the way. And I have been guilty of this at time to time. We talk about celebrating your good trades. Something that I've seen many traders do that I would not recommend for that reason is to, shall we say, and I'll go into detail, radically alter your consumption habits upon having a big winning trade or a big winning week, i.e., having a huge day and then going out and spend that money like this is the new normal. I remember,
Yeah. And I was just going to add to that, Jack. You mentioned, how do you celebrate? Obviously, a lot of people celebrate that way. It's not a healthy way to celebrate. To me, it's not about celebrating the individual trading win. It's the wins are, I followed my plan. I executed accordingly. And if you can do that Monday through Friday afternoon, you can treat yourself to something nice. I know a guy, his big thing was they collected wine. He and his wife collected wine. And after a good trading week, they'd open a nice bottle of wine on a Sunday night. And that was the treat for his execution. Like little things like that. It doesn't have to be crazy. But small little treats and small little, odes to you doing well makes a really big difference. But I think it's not about celebrating that one individual trade. For sure, you can be happy about it if it was your biggest one ever. Absolutely pat yourself on the back. But you got to put that in the past and keep moving. And the win is executing to the plan. It's not about making money.
And that could expand to larger time frames too. So from personal experience, after working overnight at the Board of Trade for a year and a half, I got my account where it was my book to manage. And the first month was a hell of a month for trading. And I would go there and punch into the calculator at the end. I'm like, well, this is how much money I made in, I guess this would have been like January 2011 or something. I'm like, wow, look at how much money I'm going to make in a year. I can live like this person now. Well, that was a better month than most, right? So I think it's important with any risky profession like this is that you have to have a good understanding of what is sort of sustainable and live that way, and never put yourself under stress, because the last place you want to be with trading is the last thing you ever want to be doing is trading futures or whatever you trade in order to make money that you need. So that's something. So just something to keep in the back of the mind there. But any other thoughts on that?
Well,
we did it. We did
yeah,
everything.
On
I
the
mean-
topic in general or something specific? I haven't had my chance to go yet.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead,
Let's see
Mike.
whatever Mick has to say.
Well, I think about, celebrating the wins and lamenting the losses. Over the years, I'm at a place now where I'm completely different where I was in the past. When I first started trading, make $500 in a day, beat your chest a little bit. Yeah, let's go out, let's celebrate, let's do some stuff. The losing days, stung. I got to a point where the winning trades that I have now, I'm very happy that it worked out and I had a good eye, but I don't use the profits from being right to go celebrate anything. On the flip side of that, the losses don't bother me anymore either. Maybe I say that with a grain of salt. Like, Jack, I remember we were at a Cubs game one time and I was telling you, I was kind of squirming in my seat because I took a big loss in the Nat Gas and then it had turned around. I puked, a short position on the highs. I remember that very well. But I'm usually not putting myself in a position where I get bothered too much by the losses. I would say for me, as I've matured or gotten further into my trading is, the wins are great. I don't go out and celebrate. I do like sharing with my wife, hey, this worked out really well. Cause normally when I take some risk, I'm talking to her about it as the days go on that I'm holding that position. She's got a background in the industry too, so she can relate a little bit. With the losses though, if you're framing out your trades and one of these outcomes comes to fruition, you could always try and find a learning from a loss or a negative outcome. But if you're framing things out, those tend to be a little bit more scarce. I remember earlier on in my trading when I did have a losing day, that's when I would go out, I guess midway through my trading career. Early on, I'd go out and celebrate winning $500 in a day. Middle of the trading career would be more like, hey, I had a bad day. I need to go take care of myself. And what I would do is I would go out and I'd treat myself to a nice lunch or a nice dinner. And I wouldn't do that on the winning days. Winning days, try and, keep it cool. I was happy with the outcome, but never overly celebratory. It was those losing days where I wanted and felt like I needed to take care of myself and do something right by myself. If you if you do something that, results in a loss and you shouldn't have done it, I firmly believe that whatever you did to get there should sting and sting pretty good. I think you need to be, to a certain extent, be hard on yourself. Especially if you deviated from a plan or you did something that you shouldn't have done, it should sting. And I say that because if it stings, you will remember it and you are less likely to replicate it. But going back to what Dan said, you do have to move on. Let it sting for a period of time. Say, I effed up. I'm not going to let that happen again, and pick yourself up by your bootstraps and move on. So there's a certain element of forgetting about it and moving past it, but not dwelling on it. I don't think that's healthy. It's really not. Learn from the things that you do wrong. Don't dwell on them and put yourself in depression where it's hard to get out of bed in the morning and go sit in front of the computer screen.
Well, yeah, the dwelling is important. I think that I see a lot of comments we get that seem to be relitigating the outcomes of trades. That why is it that I'm always puking this position and then it's working out? But then you'll look at the chart, it's like, well, yeah, it worked out a few days later after, 50 more ticks of in your face. There's no way to know how a trade really would have worked out unless you just like puke the bottom tick and it just comes roaring back. There's no way to know.
Done that.
Yeah, everyone's done that.
Oh yeah,
someone has to do it. That's the whole point of puking.
Mick, there were a couple of things you said that really kind of touched a chord. There were a couple of guys that I used to, trade in the same pit with, and we had a little saying: when the going gets tough, the tough go out to dinner. Which is exactly what you were just talking about. You have a bad day, just go treat yourself to a nice dinner. And there's a way to kind of view losses a little bit differently than just a straight out loss. I find sometimes if I put on a trade and I know that the loss is reasonable and it's in plan, if I just accept the loss right when I put on the trade, it doesn't hurt as much, right? And then there was a guy I stood next to for a little while who would just sit there and watch, and he'd take a loss and he'd say, okay, good. And he'd, take another loss and he'd say, okay, good. Finally, I'm like, you're taking losses here and you're saying, okay, good afterwards. Can you explain that to me? He says, I view losses differently. Instead of, in a cost and something that's hurting me, I'm paying for education. I'm paying for information from the market. And that's how I'm viewing it. I said, good for you. I'm still going to be pissed at losses.
Yeah.
But you got to get over it. That's just part of the game.
Yeah. It's never just the pure losses. Just the run of the mill losses are never the ones that hurt. It's if I go back and think about the worst I felt from losing trades, it was always trying to get too cute by half, and just knowing I was doing it at the time and still doing it. And then usually eventually, this is why it's important to have an accountability partner. The nice thing about trading at a firm is that they will make you get out of positions, right? Which is why it's nice to have those guidelines. I think that
tap on the shoulder
tap from the risk manager, and he was always so nice about it, but you could see he's strolling over very slowly, and it really was. They would just come over and just give you a little tap, and then get
the F out.
He not the first time. What he would say for us, he'd be like, "So, Jack, how's it going?"
You know exactly how it's going. You're watching my position right now.
Exactly. It's how it's going. And that was an implicit threat to be like, recognize how it's going. It's time. Then after that, they would just say, get out. So that was a more curt one. So, but if you have a brokerage account or something like that, I mean, yeah, you could get margin called, but there's, you'd never be in a position in a professional shop to get margin called, right? They wouldn't let you lose more than a couple percent. Like your puke limit for the day was a couple percent, maybe 5% or something like that, depending on what it was. So keep that in mind as you're making your decisions there. Sorry, I got a question here. Grateful American. Do y'all find this current market hard to trade? We've been ranging for the past 2 months with small ranges.
They're all hard to trade.
True. I think we've gone through, especially I presume you're trading equity indices. We've gone through sort of really prolonged periods for the last couple of years where there have just been very strong trends. And these choppy markets like we have now, and I think you guys tell me what you're looking at, but I think we're going to be in these chopping markets until we get the debt ceiling thing worked out. So expect another 2 weeks of it. And ranging markets, especially super tight like this, are very tough for day traders because there's just so many ways to get chopped up, especially if you're not used to it. Yeah, he
Yeah, I
says he's
think
trading
I got to go with
NQES.
exactly like Mick said. I mean,
Mm.
there's never an easy market. They're always difficult. That's why the attrition rate in this industry is so high. It's not it's never going to be easy. I think, when a market state shifts, your strategy may not be successful in that market state. And that's one of those, one of the things I say to myself all the time. I spent like a long time doing leadership training when I was in the military, and we have what are called the 11 leadership principles. And the one that really always stuck out with me was know yourself and seek self-improvement. And I looked at that one with trading quite a bit. Know your strategy. And if your strategy is not working in a specific environment, seek to improve that, or sit on your hands and say, hey, this is a market state I am not successful in. I know a lot of traders, the downside moves in for equity traders. They struggle selling the market. They struggle to find ways to short. Great at taking longs or even sometimes range bound trades. But when it comes to, a breaking market, they struggle with it. And that's a sign of like, oh, if we're in a downtrend, I'm out. If the market is working lower, I sit on my hands, I get away from it, and I don't touch it.
Yeah, I've participated over the years in a number of, trending markets where it's almost one directional, be it bull or bear. And, for all those occasions that I've been involved in those markets, really only a couple times have I ever felt like, gosh, you just go home long and you're up money every single day the next day, or gosh, you go short and you're up money. Like those are few and far between. It's always tough. This was something I thought about saying earlier with wins and losses and winning days and losing days. Like I am personally currently, like I'm way more nervous in a winning trade than when I'm in a losing trade. And it's not because I don't care about the losses. It's because I've managed my risk. So I know what my definite, max risk is on the trade. It's those ones that you hold that are working and you start thinking, oh, do I take profits here? Do I take profits there? Do I peel off some? Do I keep it on? Is it ever going to get to where I, assumed it was going to get when I put the trade on? Just thought I'd share. That was a bit of interesting. I thought that was interesting because I didn't always feel that way. I used to be nervous when I'm in the losing trades and happy and goofy in the winning trades, but that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. It's harder to lose what you have. That's
and
just
I think that's part of why, like in trading, one of the unique differentiators of taking risk in this industry versus somewhere else is like you've taken that cash and you've put that cash in your account. And then it's almost like, okay, I don't have access to this. It is now gone in a sense. I'm talking that emotional attachment to it. Once it's out of your pocket or out of your bank account, it's like, okay, like I know for a fact, like I know, some of like my E-Trade account, right? Like that money is not something I'm sitting there thinking about, okay, as part of my everyday spending. So when that money's gone, when I take heat in an E-Trade account, I'm not thinking much about it. Same thing in trading. Like when those losses come in, it's easier to accept that loss a little bit because it almost feels like I don't have that cash. So finding ways to make it realistic. Back in the day, I used to talk a lot. I have cut the cord, but I talked a lot about the cable bill, like recognizing when you're like, how do I make these losses real, feel legitimate to me? And that's finding ways. Make. I know you've talked about like old pay stubs.
Pay stubs. Yeah. Good memory, man.
So stuff like that, like finding ways to make the cash or the monetary value a little bit more realistic. So when you take a $200 loss, it's like, okay, that was a cable bill. I pay 12 of those a month or 12 of those a year. So, okay, if I lose $200, that's a whole bill for the month. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially for newer traders, making those P&Ls or that money something that's actually tangible is a big thing. I used to look at it as a number on a computer screen. Once you start taking payouts, that changes a little bit, but that's a big thing, especially goes back to what John was saying after a big winning day. That's when people tend to have their larger losing days. Guilty of that when I started off too. It's like, oh, I've got this much in my account now, or I can risk this much more on the trade because I did so well yesterday. I mean, that was totally me, John. That was totally me.
Yeah. Well, before we close up, the Mongoose, which I love the name, the Mongoose, asked, he started getting interested in markets I presume last year. So he's way better at taking shorts than longs. That is true. I'll give it a caveat. An old saying we had is the easiest trading environment anyone trades in is always their first year. It always gets harder every year. And also
create expectations.
Yeah, and be careful of the bias of that, because while we were in a prolonged short thing, history, if you're trading the equity indices, history makes it pretty hard to be a perma short unless you're being pretty clever, especially since this, we're a pretty strong uptrend in the equity indices since the end of last year. So, and that's still intact, even as we've been like range bound here. We're still kind of sitting above this very long trend line I have on my chart. So we'll see what happens. Will we default? Will we have no more internet to do little casts like this on? We don't know, but we'll probably will by June. So with that, Dan, you got a quote for us before we head out?
I do. I don't think this guy was much of a trader, but John Adams, the former president, I like this quote. When you see a good move, sit on your hands and find a better one. I don't think he was talking about trading, but I think it correlates to trading pretty well. You see a good one, doesn't mean it's the best one. So be patient, wait for the best opportunities. And if you're not seeing it, you don't have to trade.
That's great. Good to hear from John Adams. I feel like he's been kind of overlooked by history to some extent, but you can watch the Paul Giamatti John Adams 8-part series.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hear John Adams and I think of Paul Giamatti's face from the cover of those DVDs.
He's the only founding father who's president who does not have like a monument in DC. So I know there's like some John Adams stands out there who are like, hey, be nicer, John Adams. So,
and he had a son be the president too.
Old Quincy, John Quincy Adams. All right, so this is the history you get with those two. So we'll be back next week. Check out the prep, everything else that we're doing. We're making changes, trying to get some more guests, do some more live trading. So bear with us as we test out the technology. Y'all are great, though. Thanks for stopping by. And Hogue, you want to take it home?
Sure. With regards to the question about the current market state, how difficult it is, the market is going to, well, as soon as you get the right answers, the market's going to change the questions. Always be flexible and creative in your trading. Trade well, everyone.